Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our latest edition of Ask the Experts virtual series, Get On Board, where we'll be talking today about how seasoned board members, property management professionals, and new board members can join their board for their community, and the areas that new board members should focus on. I'm Travis Brandt. I'm director at First Service Residential, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Real quick, just wanted to go through some housekeeping items. If there are any questions during today's webinar, please go ahead and submit them through the Q&A option that you'll find right there on the bottom of your screen. If we have a few minutes, we'll definitely answer those at the end of today's presentation. There's also no need to take notes. We'll be recording today's session, and as a follow-up, we will be sending it to all of the attendees. Finally, we'll be posting a piece in the chat box. It's called 5 Solutions to Common Board Member Blunders, and that'll come up in the next few minutes. We would just suggest that maybe you download that and keep it for future reference. It's been a great piece. We've gotten some excellent feedback on some of the information that it contains, and just want to share that as an additional piece of support. But we have a great program for you today. We're excited that you were able to join us, and I want to get started and introduce our panel that's here with us today. First, I want to introduce Crystal McClary. She's an operations manager and startup coordinator with First Service. Crystal, good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Travis.
Absolutely. And then I also want to introduce Edwin Lugo, who's a vice president with First Service. Edwin, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Travis, thank you. Excited to be here this afternoon.
Absolutely. Excited to have you both join us and share some good some good information. I just want to kind of introduce our topic today. You know, an association is really, in our minds, as effective as the leaders who run them. We all know that these leaders are volunteers. Serving on the board of a condominium or a community association or a homeowners association, it's a huge responsibility. So when there are new members on the board, we want to make sure that they're up and running as quickly as possible. Both Edwin and Crystal are here today to share some of their best practices and offer practical advice on how these new board members can really get started on the right foot. We asked our board members to submit some of the questions for discussion today. So let's get started. We'll dive right in. The first question that we asked, and I think a great way to kick this off today, guys, it said, I'm a brand new board member. What's the first thing I should do? Broad topic, really kind of introduces this whole discussion today. Edwin, I'll let you go ahead and get started, but when somebody approaches you and says, hey, what's the first thing I should do? Where do you start?
Well, Travis, thank you. You know what, and I can empathize definitely with all our new board members. I too am a board member, so I not only do I do this for a living as a career, but I'm also actively involved in my own HOA as well, serving on the association. So I remember those first days coming in, and I was like, wow, it's a little jittery and a little nerve-wracking. And you know, one of the things that I made sure and my constituents reminded me, and I always remind my board members, is remember, you're part of a leadership team now. You're part of, you're leading a corporation. You're responsible for running a business, and your investors are your association members. So if you keep that in the back of your mind at all times, you'll understand what's important, that you're now in the hot seat. You're responsible for maximizing the return on their investment on their homes. At the same time, you're an elected official, right? So you're responsible for maintaining and enhancing the quality of their life. So one of the first things you want to do is wrap your head around and make sure that as an elected official, you are compliant, right? So you must get certified as a board member within the first 90 days of having been elected or appointed onto the board. And that's critical to your onboarding process, because you need to understand what you've gotten yourself into, right? You need to have read the governing documents, read the Florida statutes, understand the declaration, articles, and bylaws of the community, and any other rules that might have been adopted over time, because now you're responsible for upholding and enforcing those rules. And you know what? A lot of times I'll tell my board members, listen, you don't have to do this alone either. The certification process is very important. You can get away with signing off a certification form and eventually getting around to those things, or use your partners. Your management company or your association attorney can easily be there for you and help certify you and get you through the process and onboard, so that you're familiarized, you've been able to familiarize yourself with the governing documents and statutes, so that you are prepared to adequately uphold your office moving forward.
Perfect. Excellent. I think, first of all, Edwin, doing it both professionally and personally, kudos to you. I think a lot of times, we joke about that, but the community is certainly lucky to have that. But then, moving forward, we oftentimes compare reading your governing documents or reading, Florida statutes as bedtime material, right? It's maybe not the most exciting. Why not get one of those courses that's really going to hone in on the important areas? So great, great stuff there. Crystal, what would you have to say? What's the first thing you tell a board member that they need to be focused on?
Well, I agree wholeheartedly with what Edwin is saying, is really familiarize yourself with the documents that are running your particular association, because everyone and every association is unique. Whether you're a condo association, which is different than a homeowners association, there are different statutes in Florida that are going to govern your activity, both behaviorally, financially, your duties that you're going to uphold. But those governing docs are going to be the framework. Think of it as a roadmap for how you and your peers get business done throughout the day. And really, it'll help you set various goals that you have. Those docs are going to give you important dates. They're going to give you important procedures to follow. Just because it says one way at your neighbor's property doesn't mean that it's going to be the same way there within your community. So really get to know the nuts and bolts of what makes your community you. Another thing that I found recently that was very helpful is if you happen to have, say, a boating community, if you're waterways throughout your area, find out if there's any certifications that the rest of your board mates either have or are interested in getting. Just like if you have a food and beverage operation, which is very important, there's going to be some licensures, some filings with the state, various entities that are very important to go ahead and document as part of that food and beverage operation now that you are an interested party to the organization. So really your first step is going to be your governing documents particular to your association, and really see if there's any other certifications, any training that would be really integral to what's going on in the area and to your mission there.
Excellent points. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question now. So next question, kind of on the tail end of what we just asked, still kind of getting into this, but a board member asked, can we go over the basics? What are some of the things I need to know to effectively serve my community as a board member? Good intentions in mind, where are some of those areas that they might go? Crystal, we'll let you kick us off with this one.
Sure. And I think that dovetails, that goes right into the previous question of what is my first stop and then what are the basics. So after that certification, after you're looking through your documents, the other thing that your documents are going to tell you are the roles and the responsibilities that an office member is going to have. And it's really going to tell you what's the difference between someone who's holding office amongst the board, someone who's a director. How can I spread my wings? What are the responsibilities, the roadmap that I'm going to go to? Some of these roadmaps can be very vague. Some of them can be detailed, and they're really just going to help you look through that process and the procedure. Really just get to know your peers, get to know how they handle those responsibilities, and see how you can work hand in hand with everyone. The biggest takeaway in your first couple weeks, your first month as a board member, is don't feel pressured that you have to have all the answers. Give yourself some grace. By getting to know your documents, by leaning on your peers, you can say to the person who's asking you a question, you know what, I don't know the answer, but I know where to look. Let me get back to you on that. And that's something that we use in our industry that I think is very helpful. Edwin, what's some of your experience?
Thanks, Crystal. Well, definitely, the governing documents provide that structure, right, to operate effectively. It gives you kind of like the bumpers at a bowling alley, kind of guides you where you can and can't go to. But equally important, I always tell my people, you've got to do your homework. You've got to you'll have your peers, they'll support you and help you, but, partner up with your management team too, and ask them to, in a sense, you're going to be in office for the next year. So you should have a binder that has some of the essentials to help you understand your role and what you need to do moving forward, right? So a copy of your budget, the latest year-end financial statements, audited financial statements if you have them, current financial statements, reserve study for your community, maybe the last few sets of minutes so you can kind of catch up and understand what's happened in the past and what may be pending, what's new business, unfinished business, right? Your monthly manager's report, that helps a lot because that captures all aspects of the operation. Maybe a contract summary of all the vendors that are in place, right? Landscaping, pool, security, things like that, so that you have a good grip and a handle and you can understand, where are the funds going? What are we looking at spending? What have we spent? And what's our average spend for the month? And so you understand a little bit better about the inner workings. So it's one thing to be on the outside of things, as an owner, living your daily lives within the community. But once you're responsible for the operation and guiding how that community is going to be managing its assets and moving forward, it's a whole different aspect, right? And then, of course, understanding those roles and responsibilities are really important, whether you're president, vice president, treasurer, secretary. So you'll have to wrap your head around that as well. So that's important, starting to learn those different roles and where you fall into that mix with your board.
Sure. And typically, Edwin, do you normally find that folks join the board looking at those roles? Do they have that understanding of what each of those roles are doing, or how how each of those officer positions integrate into that overall responsibility?
Absolutely. Some might come in with, I plan on being president, but others, they understand that it's not just about that lead role and presiding over the meetings and having the time. They understand that, they come into this with, their own skill sets and experiences, and maybe attributes from their own careers that they can bring. And some of them, they opt, I'm very organized and I think I'd be best served as secretary, or, have a very strong financial background. I should be treasurer. And so that's something amongst the board at their organizational meeting, when they determine what role they should take on. It's the best time to do that. And that's what I recommend is understanding your own strengths and weaknesses and where you would be best suited to really serve the community, and really where the community can benefit from all your expertise and what you have to bring to the table.
Absolutely. And I think the only other, you guys both hit on it, and Crystal mentioned it as well with some of her examples. If you have individuals that are willing to volunteer to make the community better, really capitalize on those strengths, right? I think one of the other areas that maybe we haven't touched on yet, but I know we're going to get into, has to do with different committees. So whether it's a, marina committee, like Crystal mentioned, whether it's a food and beverage committee, whether it's a finance committee, if you have individuals that are CPAs or are captains or used to run, hospitality outfits, that's all very valuable experience and very relevant knowledge. And so to your point, let's use that to the greater good, right? Moving on. This next question came from a board member. They identified themselves as a self-managed community. And so they asked, how does the board, or how, I guess, would the board interact with a professional property management company? Who's responsible for what? Edwin, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with this one?
Travis, thanks. So first, it's really important to know, and the board is one that sets the policies, establishes direction for the association, they make the decisions. The management company is the one that implements those board directives and takes care of the operations and carries out the board's vision. The management company is an agent of the association, serves the community at the direction of the board. So a lot of times there's kind of confusion between them. People, they feel there's a little gray area, but no, the management company is there to serve the entire community, but at the direction of the board. And your board are the elected officials that the community has elected or appointed to serve their best interest. One thing that I always recommend is, it's a pivotal transition. And I've also assumed some self-managed associations over the years. You have to set and manage those expectations. And it's hard to let go sometimes, because self-managed associations have had a lot of experience over the years, and they've done a really good job of managing their associations, their properties along the way. But at some point, someone decided, the board or a collective, the association at large said, maybe it's time to hire a professional management company. And it could be that, they had a president or a group of individuals that ran the association for about 10 years, but now the incoming board, they don't have that time to dedicate, resources dedicate that much time to managing the association. So they hire that management company. So what's important is, understanding those and setting those expectations, and then of course identifying that liaison between the board and the manager or management company, because sometimes we might have 5, 7, 9 member boards, and it's very difficult to kind of have an understanding of what everybody wants collectively when you have that many individuals leading you in different directions. So one of the first things I ask for when we go into a self-managed property is help us understand your direction. Who's my point person? Who am I going to speak with and get this going and deal with the day-to-day? They're really important key factors there when you're taking on a self-managed community, but very important question.
Absolutely. Crystal, what else can you tell us about maybe areas that a property management company can help you with?
I really like the partnership that's created. When you have a professional property management company in line with you, they're right there taking the punches, making the swings, the jabs throughout your life as a board member. So really lean into that relationship, that partnership. That doesn't mean that you're giving up the reins, but that means that you're allowing your agent, your partner, to really work within their wheelhouse, their expertise of helping you make the financially responsible decisions, of helping you make the great improvements to your community. If you've got a big landscaping project, and it's Florida, we have a lot of landscaping projects going on year round because we live in a beautiful area. Why not lean into the expertise that your CAM has really grown and built over the years? And that goes into all kinds of relationships with vendors. In our industry, we have a great opportunity to network and to build a web of support amongst one another. And so a lot of times we'll see that flourish in the networking opportunities. There are board members more than welcome at these networking opportunities. The CAMs are there. And so why not tag along with your CAM and say, hey, let's get out of the office. And, to an outsider, it might look like, oh, they're going for a free lunch. By the way, yes, the lunch is free. But also there's a great wealth of information that is offered, because then you're investing in yourself. Your CAM is being invested into, and really you can take those networking opportunities. You learned a little golden nugget of information, and all of a sudden you're drawing on that. If not right now, then you are in the future. And so that's one example of really how you can nurture that relationship and that partnership. Another too is really just take a look at, like Edwin and Travis said before, take a look at the strengths of the people who are around you on your committees. Get your leader of your committee right hand in hand with your CAM and yourself with your vendor, and that could be a good little group to go along with. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can really build those relationships, and really make it a shared responsibility, because after all, this is a volunteer position. There are so many zeros that you can put at the end of the paycheck you get at the end of the week. But let us be your partner. Let us take some of that load off so that you can enjoy life at home, and we can just keep pushing forward.
Absolutely. And I think, what it strikes my memory, we're talking a lot about support, right? We're talking a lot about an expertise. I think new board members may not recognize that, when a community association can be a complex business. There can be a lot of moving pieces within that business. And so, we tell the story all the time that your average board member is not going to be an expert in all things finance, and all things investing, and all things insurance, and all things, energy management. And so it's great to enlist those experts or those subject matter experts when you can, to help insulate yourself and make sure that you're doing things as responsibly as you can. And like Edwin mentioned earlier, it's a fiduciary duty. You're really tasked with overseeing kind of the funds of friends and neighbors. So we want to make sure we're doing that correctly. And again, to your point, use the resources that you have. Moving on, the next question that was submitted, it says, our community is hoping to accomplish a lot in the year ahead. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. It seems like too much for the board to handle on their own. how do we encourage participation from other residents in the community? And Edwin, I'll punt that one over to you to start with.
Thanks, Travis. So, when you look at the year ahead, I think first you need to start and look within and understand that, okay, some of the board members, it could be a complete change of board all at once, or maybe a majority of the board members all at once. But what's critical at the very onset, establishing alignment, right? Because a lack of alignment can lead to a dysfunctional board, which could lead to like stagnant decision making and a poor reputation with the community, right? So, many times elections will result in 3, 5, even 7 owners who may or may not know each other, who may or may not have even campaigned together, to have to come together, right? And they only have one thing in common: it's the yearning to serve and maintain and improve their community. So they might not know each other's goals or vision for the next year, right? This is where planning and alignment are critical to their success. And so before even encouraging participation from others, understand each other first and be a collective unit with a collective vision going forward, right? So I've seen many times where boards will spend first half of their term, first half of the year, 6 months, just trying to figure things out rather than holding this strat session to review what they've inherited and where they're headed. And they need that overview, right? They need to understand operations, back of house, physical plant, mechanical rooms, because at times they're going to be entrusted with, 5-6 figure decisions, and without knowing really what they're getting themselves into and what they're deciding on. And of course, during the session, right, sharing their goals and determining how they're going to plan and operate and conduct business, and moving forward and identifying their mission and strategy, that way they can definitely secure success in their overall alignment. Because without that alignment, the projects will fall to the wayside, decisions will just kind of sit on the table, there'll be a lot of unfinished business, and their ability to improve the community and the overall experience will be at risk. So definitely, before you even venture into asking for help, understand what you're doing together as a team before you start delegating other responsibilities that are geared towards your vision and your goals to volunteers and committee members. That's some of my advice.
And I love that, just to kick us off there, right? I mean, I think when we talk about that idea of board effectiveness, how can a board be effective? I think we're totally on the same page with the advice that we would give. It really has nothing to do with whether you're self-managed or whether you have a management company. It has nothing to do with the size of your community. But we see boards all the time that'll roll out a list of, 20 different projects that they want to accomplish in a year. It's just not realistic, regardless of how much help you have. Maybe you identify the top 5, for example. And so I think that's just so important. It shouldn't be understated. But Crystal, once that board has the alignment, they're on the same page with really what they want to accomplish, what are some other ways that they can get some of the other owners involved?
You bring up a good point, is involvement after the focus that's happened, sharpening that pencil. So I think one of the biggest things that we look to as being a responsible board member is, hey, how can I shave some of these dollars and cents down? Yes, you can always delegate and hire professionals to do something, hire a vendor. But think about the person who stopped you on the side of the street and said, hey, why does that flower, why does that bush look the way that it does? Shouldn't it be like this? So while some might take that criticism just as that criticism, they may not realize that perhaps that's an arborist, or perhaps that was a gardener. Maybe that person had their own nursery, or maybe that's someone who just really enjoys the act of gardening in their backyard, but they don't have one. So take that opportunity, transform it, put a little silver lining on it, and you could find that that could be a committee member. Maybe you have a capital project coming up. You want to make some improvements on around the community, and you're just not quite sure where to start. if you happen to have a neighbor who was an architect or someone who was in the design field, they might have some really good ideas where you could engage their talents. Maybe put out an all call or make sort of an intake sheet for when you are acclimating or onboarding a new homeowner to the community that your office can use, or however you do your intake. And the coordination of a new home or for your property. But you could have, hey, what are my hobbies? What are my interests? What does my past life look like? And from that, you can build a database of all these talents that you have right at your fingertips and really engage those talents. Because I'll tell you, when you have people who are genuinely interested, that investment grows. The investment of time and confidence in their surrounding. They really care. And at the end of the day, you want to have people on your team that care. And it's even better if you don't have to pay a big sum to get that interaction to happen.
100%. And the idea of just leveraging, other people's abilities, putting them on those committees, organizing it in such a way that it's going to be productive to accomplish those items that you've identified as priorities. It's just, I think we all see it, that committees are really a great way for the board to accomplish more, based on that community. You got to delegate it. They're volunteers. I think that's a huge theme, that they don't have to do everything themselves. And so committees are a great way to do that. But moving on, this board member had a question about really one of the most important aspects of running an association, and that has to do with the finances and the financial profile. So the question is, I want to make sure I understand what running an association from a financial perspective entails. Can you go over the main areas of the financial perspective? So Edwin, why don't you kick us off with that on what are the areas that they need to be looking at?
Sure, Travis, thank you. As a board member, one of your most important responsibilities is managing the association's finances, right? Your association is depending on you to make the right decisions and manage your money wisely, especially during these times, right? So it begins with your operating budget, right? And this is what I spoke to about earlier, where you need to get a copy of that budget. You need to get a copy of your financial statements, your audits, your year-end financial statements, because the best indicator for future performance is historical, right? So you want to look at your history. You want to see, because many times our board members inherit a budget that they had no involvement in the process with, right? So historically, most associations are trying to be fiscally responsible, not increase budgets along the way, and be mindful of their owners' financial circumstances. But without understanding that budget and really diving into it, getting to understand it, right, and where the expenses are, and then tracking those expenses, you're not going to get very far, right? Your budget is your plan for the year, but it's a living, breathing document. And, you will deviate at times, and for unforeseen expenses, market adjustments, or incidents throughout the year. But as you're reviewing your budget and you're trying to stick to it, just make sure that you're being responsible and you're objective, right? Basing it on historical spend and research, and don't just try to, justify reductions based on hunches, right? It's really important because you're playing with other people's money, right? And when you budget, you've got to budget with future years and goals in mind. Sometimes I'll see boards that they're just really concerned about the immediate, right? That 1 year. But it's not about that, because what you do now can have a rippling effect years down the line, just simply by not even taking into consideration CPI, right? And just even passing an increase of CPI every year to trend with the market. You go 10 years, even just 5 years without an increase on your budget. By year 6, you might be doing a catch up. And next thing you know, you're increasing your budget by 10%. Instead of a nice gradual 1.5% to 2% every year. So really important. And then of course, understanding all the aspects that go into budgeting, right? And then again, budgeting for the future, building in a working capital, right? Where you have a good amount of funds set aside in the bank, not just with reserves, but just in order to establish cash flow, because you never know when something might impact your owners where they can't make timely payments, and you have a good percentage that fall in arrears, so that working capital comes into play. So a lot goes into just understanding the budget and working through it and evaluating, analyzing, and monitoring it over the months and years. Really important, begin with that operating budget.
Mm-hmm. And then past the operating. So a lot of times I think we start looking, especially when you're talking about some of the planning, reserves. I know this past year, one of the other things that has been a concern had been collection of assessments. Some of the homeowners or residents have seen some hardships in the past year. And so those collections and having those policies in place as well seem to be just as important, so that community can continue to operate like the business that it is, right? Crystal, anything else just on the financials or anything else that you wanted to include there?
Oh, sure. Thank you. One of the things that I really like getting a hold of is the reserve analysis. Let's take a look at our roadmap for finances because we want to know, do we have enough in the bank to take care of those big projects? Your reserve analysis is not going to usually list out every single item that you have there at your property, whether it's at a clubhouse, whether it's the elevators for your 20 some flights that you've got to get people to. It's going to be pretty general, but the good news is that it can be another roadmap for you along with your docs. So, while the reserve analysis isn't always considered just a financial document, go ahead and include it in there. Make sure that when you have a transition going on, whether it's between management companies, whether it's between your board members, that is readily accessible, because that's really going to give you a snapshot of what do you have to look toward, not only this year, but more so the year after, 3 years from now. And it'll also give you some good information on your useful life. So just a little tip in there, grab one of those.
Perfect. One extra thing I want to just interject while we're on this topic. We did have a question come in. We're going to get to all of them at the end here, but one of the attendees did ask, what are the rules regarding reserve line items of annual budgets? Edwin, you touched briefly the different ways of doing it. Obviously, there's going to be some differences between condo and HOA based on 718 or 720, but just in general, are there any comments that you guys can share as far as general rules around reserve line items?
Well, number one, you have to understand how it is that your association is funding those reserves, right? So there are two ways of funding reserves. And the more popular and typical one that's usually adopted by most developers and included in your governing docs is a straight line funding. So what is that, right? So straight line funding establishes different buckets for different projects where each has their own set of dedicated funds, and adequate money is placed into those buckets before those projects can be started or completed, right? So let's say roof, right? You have a roof or you have an elevator. You're gonna save up until those items have reached their useful life. So let's say your roof has an expectancy of 25 years, and it's call it $100,000 roof, right? So you're gonna save along the way over the 25 years, call it $4,000 a year, $300 a month or so, until you get to what you need to spend, right? Until that roof is expired and it's time to replace it. The other, and now which is gaining much more popularity, is called pooled reserves, also known as cash flow funding. And pooled reserves it's gained popularity in the past decade or so. And it's where your money is set aside in one overall pot for completing projects. So this allows a little more flexibility. You still have to identify what you're saving for, but you have this pot of money that can go towards any one of those elements within your reserve study at any given time. And you'll have to, of course, once you use those funds for whatever specific item that it was used for, you'll have to kind of pitch back in and replenish those funds. But at least it gives you that. And when you go to use these reserves, you have to remember that they're intended for that specific purpose. So don't deviate unless you're ready to go to member vote, unit owner vote, because that's really important, because at the end of the day, this is the people's money. This is the owner's money. It's not the board's. And the boards don't really have carte blanche to really spend outside of what it was intended for. So really important there to understand that these are governed monies, right, and regulated monies, and you can't go spending it freely like you would your operating funds that are budgeted for. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. And I think that's an important distinction. And to your point, a couple of options that maybe we didn't see 10 years ago that are really starting to gain popularity. But I think the overriding point is that, look, reserves are for specific repairs and replacements, right? It's not like an operating that can just cover general expenses, for lack of a better word. So appreciate you guys just kind of adding some color there.
Absolutely. And Travis, we can keep going. We haven't spoken about financial statements, and you touched briefly on collections. I don't know if you wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit more or move on to the next question. But
If there's a couple of points that you have on the collections delinquencies, I know that that's kind of been a challenge for some communities over the last 12 months. You know, we don't need to hide from the fact that the last 12 months have been something we've never seen before. So absolutely, if you have some thoughts, please share.
So I wanted to backtrack and go into the financial statements, which your delinquency report is part of the financial statements, right? So when you're looking at your financial statements, right, it's, you know, you're looking at basically your accounts receivable, your accounts payable, and your general ledger, right? You're looking at those three main aspects, and you'll have your balance sheet that has your assets and your liability and your equity, which is basically what you have, what you owe, and what you're worth. But you also have your income statement, which shows, you know, your expenses against budget and those variances. And just as important as, you know, watching what you spend is watching what comes in, right? So I always ask my board members, please monitor your financial statements on a monthly basis. Don't wait for that train to hit you 6 months down the road because you thought you had plenty of money and you weren't really watching the shop. So, you know, when you're talking about money, you want to make sure you're ensuring a steady flow of cash into the association, right? And during this pandemic, for sure, it's been very difficult. It's been a major topic and challenge for our boards. And in many of our associations, you know, we're seeing, you know, some owners are asking for payment plans, waiver of late fees, board members, please try to find a way to reduce the budget, you know, et cetera. Just keep in mind, what you do for one, you have to do for all. So I always recommend have a clear set collection policy, and the board can adopt this, you know, change it, you know, edit it, manage it, however they see fit, you know, to fit the times. But, you know, make sure that at the end of the day, I know we're all neighbors, but you have to actively monitor and pursue those delinquent accounts to give you the peace of mind to properly operate your association without impacting operations, you know, delaying repairs, improvements, or other essentials. And, you know, at the end of the day, it also avoids placing further financial burdens on the owners who are paying their current and are current with their assessments, right? Because when you have this, you know, unsteady flow of cash, and you have this kind of despair, and you have these delinquencies that are running high, at the end of the day, you might have to turn to loans or a special assessment, and everybody knows nobody likes that SA word. It's not a fun term in associations, but you want to be able to curtail that so that you can operate with that peace of mind.
Absolutely. Well, no, and just such good input. And I think things that, as you said, if it's consistently monitored, right, then, you know, you really do yourself a service in not getting in one of those holes. And I think we've seen that. I think a lot of boards that we've seen, at least this past year, have just been reasonable. They've set up, like you mentioned, different kind of payment plans. They've figured out situations on how to keep, you know, the majority of their owners current. I think maybe some communities are still feeling or remember some of the effects of 10, 12 years ago, you know, with the housing crisis, where we had major special assessments just to keep lights on, or, you know, just to keep roads paved, or whatever it was. But to your point, I love that. I think that as long as you're monitoring that, you're staying on top of it, you're looking at it when it comes out in every single monthly financial, it keeps us ahead of the curve on, you know, on monitoring and working with our owners. The goal at the end of the day, and I think this stands on multiple categories, but you know, the goal is not to levy late fees. The goal is not to fine owners. The goal is just that, you know, they're able to meet their obligations with their assessments, that they follow the rules and regulations. At the end of the day, that's the name of the game. So I like that. Anything that we can do to help, you know, keep them current benefits the group, right? It benefits the community as a whole.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So pivoting slightly, we'll move on there, and we're going to circle back. I did see a couple questions come in from a financial perspective. We're going to have some time. We'll hit those here in a few minutes. But the next question that we had really had to do around meetings and board meetings and things of that nature. I'd like to check in with each of you and have each of you just maybe share some best practices for effectively running board meetings. Edwin, we'll start with you, and then we'll go over to Crystal, just as far as, you know, frequency, consistency, how they're organized, and some of those types of things.
All right, Travis. Well, again, I do have experience on both sides of the fence here, right? And one thing that I always, impress upon my board members is you have to demand respect for the process, right? How do you do that, right? So you have to first establish a schedule, an expectation, right, with your community where they know that they can rely on the board to meet at a certain day and time of the month. So, call it 7 p.m., second Tuesday of the month, every month, right? And then when you start on time, make sure that your board members, your fellow board members are also respectful of everyone else's time and the agenda so that they are on time as well. You have quorum and you're starting your meeting on time as scheduled, as published, right? And consistently establishing that quorum, right? Not missing or canceling any meetings, because then that kind of upsets the routine as well. And just as important, adopting parliamentary procedures. Some people might look to Robert's rules or call it Robert's rules. It doesn't have to be Robert's rules per se, but you definitely want some kind of process that sets the expectation for the board and the owners at these meetings so that they understand how the board is going to conduct the business for that evening or for that meeting. And yeah, I've got a lot of advice on this one too, right? So when we're talking about time, avoid those long meetings. Rule of thumb is, anything after an hour and a half, you start to undo all the good that you did during those first 90 minutes. So, try to avoid lengthy meetings. If you need to adjourn and reconvene another day to follow up and conduct more business, that's probably a better practice than trying to go into a marathon meeting, 2, 3, 4 hours. Seen those in my day. Make sure as a board member that you've done your homework, come prepared. Don't open your book or your binder or your minutes at the meeting and start reviewing right then and there. Understand what you're looking at, what's on the agenda, look at the proposal, look at all the information that your fellow board members, committee members, or manager put together for you. Call ahead of time if you have any questions. And as you're sitting through these meetings, again, keep the flow going, right? Try not to kind of dwell on things, move the question, right? Make sure that you have decisive actions, votes, and not go into, conjecture and tangents, right? And make sure that your motions are focused with action, right? Avoid situations where everyone's just talking about something, but there's no clear focus on what the motion was or final action was. And, I would say at the same time, in a sense, kind of keep it interactive. Your owners come there; they're spectators in a sense, right? And parliamentary procedure says it's a board meeting and they're there to observe. But sometimes it is healthy to allow some conjecture, allow them to participate, give them their 3 minutes to speak, or let them, opine or contribute to a specific topic. But of course, be careful, be wary of the loose cannons who can, derail your meetings. And at the same time, could kind of have an emotional impact on you. So just, make sure to always kind of bring back the focus to what you're dealing with and deal with the issues. And definitely, if things get threatening, deal with the issue and not the threat. So just some guides, some little advice there on, running an effective meeting. Those are some of the things that I would suggest board members keep in mind.
No, I agree. And I love the preparation. I think the binder, whether a community has a management company or not, board members understanding what's going to happen at that meeting and having the information to make those decisions ahead of time, it's critical. You don't want to have all your owners together and then be discussing, well, what was proposed, and so there is that level of professionalism where we want to make sure that the folks that are leading the community come to those meetings prepared and know the business that is to be conducted there. So that's important. Crystal, we've seen a little bit of change in what board meetings can potentially look like over the last 12 months. Talk to us a little bit of that. I mean, this time last year, end of February, nobody knew what COVID was yet. The thought of having a virtual board meeting was something that almost nobody was doing. What have we seen there? How has it changed? Just chat with us a little bit about that.
Travis, I can tell you we are in a time of change. If nothing else, we need to embrace the change that's going on to keep up with the times. And one way of doing that is by being transparent and still conducting our meetings in a public manner. But let's engage technology. You know, it's there, it's at our fingertips. There are so many platforms that can be used. There are some that are paid for, there are some that are free for use with an email membership. Just so many options out there that we're finding to really work even into it's starting to build a momentum of becoming part of our best practices. You know, those tips and tricks that we were just talking about of having the efficient board meetings, of really doing things on the up and up. Let's integrate some technology. So, in one of the recent surveys that the company sent out, First Service makes it a practice, speaking of which, to stay in touch with our board members. We want to really keep our finger on the pulse of, hey, what's working, what's not. Give us some constructive feedback. Are there any opportunities for improvement? But also tell us what you're doing. Tell us what we're doing that's working. And one of those common threads, and 89% of the responses, we found that board members are really intending on continuing with the technology integration. So what does that mean? That means go ahead and enroll in that year-long membership for your Zoom account, or go ahead and get that discount for the repetitive billing that you have on the Teams or the WebEx, because we're finding a lot of positive feedback, both from the membership, from your on-site management team, and even from vendors alike, because there are people who have more opportunity to join where they may not have been able to before in person, or maybe they feel more comfortable with that visual aspect. We really like that human connection of being able to see one another, expressions. There's just a different level of transparency, if you'd say, to being able to integrate this technology in the virtual meetings. So I believe strongly that that's something that we should really consider to keep on moving forward with.
Well, and I love that point. And I think couldn't agree more that it's something that really was thrust upon everybody, maybe not willingly, but something where, I mean, we have some communities, I know you guys see it too, that their board meetings these days, especially some of the larger ones, they're full on productions. And I mean, they are, they have lights and cameras, and it's really an impressive scene when you see it. But that's the whole point. They want to make sure that their owners know what's going on. They understand what decisions the board is making. They understand the why behind it. I think just in general, transparency from a board is going to lead to far less frustration from your owners. And so we've gotten similar feedback from owners that, hey, normally I can't make these board meetings. Maybe I'm at work. Maybe I have to, go pick up the kids or something like that. Hey, when it's on Zoom, I can, click it on my phone and listen in my earplugs. I can watch it at work. I can do different things. And I think maybe an unintended positive consequence was that a lot more people are able to engage and understand what's going on. And I think in general, that's a very good thing. So, again, something that's likely here to stay, and at least in some form or fashion. So quite a year as everybody, we continue to say. I want to just ask real quick a question of each of you, kind of as a takeaway, and then we have had some great questions posted so far. So I want to leave a few minutes to dive into a few of those. So just in ending kind of the prepared questions, new board member, you guys are helping to steer that community. The single best piece of advice that you would give a brand new board member. Edwin, we'll let you go first there.
Thanks, Travis. So I'll go back to the whole alignment and understanding that you're running a corporation, right? So like a corporation, have that vision, have that mission statement, have that motto, have that code of ethics, and understanding how you are going to work and operate as a team, right? You need that unification, that unity at the very forefront in order to get what you want to accomplish throughout the year, right? And we're all going to have our differences at some point. We're going to have disagreements when I don't agree on certain projects or whatever expenditures. But as long as you establish that at the forefront, it's a road for success. If you try to kind of, like they say, build the plane in the air while it's flying, it's a recipe for disaster. So that's my takeaway on this one, Travis. Just that alignment and just establishing that foundation at the onset.
Love it. Love it. Crystal, what you got?
I'm hand in hand with Edwin here. I think that alignment is so attractive. When you're on a team that has the same mission, that has the same destination at the end of the day, that's really a blessing. It's a gift because that means we're all here for the same purpose. We want to see our community thrive and flourish and do great, wonderful things. You want to attract new buyers for a healthy real estate market. You want to retain your ownership. You want to be that community, perhaps that is the example to your neighbors. So how do we do that? We get on the same page. We take that moment during transition of board and we're onboarding the new board members to, hey, let's post a workshop. Yes, it's an open board meeting, but this is where we're going to shake out all the sillies. We're going to get things out on the table and we're going to say, okay, what was done before? What has been the mission? How did we get here? And what can we do to go forward in a fruitful manner? Because really at the end of the day, we're taking people's attributes, everything that makes a person unique and really gives them a drive to get up in the morning. We're taking those attributes and funneling them into one room where we've got so many good things going on. And it's okay to disagree. We just have to be professional in the way that we do it. And I think that when we can be professional, we can get on the same page and we really just align and make sure that we're here for the right reasons. There's nothing going to be but success, that surrounds you. And I think that the community will do very well with an aligned, respectful, professional board.
I think to your point, if a board can align on the same mission, the same vision for the community, it's huge. It totally is just a game changer as they move forward. Disagreements in a healthy way, nothing wrong with it. We just want to make sure that that ship continues forward, right? So guys, we have about 8 minutes left or so. I want to have a chance to jump into some of these questions. So I'm going to start running through them. They're a little broad range, so we'll jump around a little bit, but I want to try to get to as many as we can with the attendees that we have on. The first one I think is an easier one. It has to do with the board certification that we mentioned in the first question. It says, is certification a required process? If so, are there specific criteria? I think we've established that it is a required process, but that there's options, right? So quickly, what are those options?
Sure. So we see a couple, thanks. We see a couple options in the industry. You'll find that there are online courses that a board member can attend for the certification. There's the option where you can read your documents. You sign a piece of paper saying, hey, I was there, I've been there, done that, and I promise I'm going to do great. Like, throw me in, coach. One of the more successful things that we've seen is check out to see if there's an expo of sorts going on in your area, because that goes back to the networking opportunity I mentioned before. You'll be able to meet peers, so other new board members, maybe established board members. You'll be able to, at this expo, meet some vendors that are common to your industry, and you'll also be able to see some management companies. What are they showing at this expo? Speaking of management companies, there are some in the area, including First Service Residential, that hosts board certification classes. And that's where we would partner with one of the local attorneys, the law firms, that really knows their stuff and is able to pass on that wealth of knowledge. You go ahead and you get your certificate, and that certificate is stored with the official records of your association.
Perfect. And I think just in general, for those that may be new board members, board certification classes are some of the more common classes that you'll find out there. All the attorneys do them. Most of the property management companies do them. Just so everybody's aware, First Service is hosting a board certification course on March 16th. That invitation will be coming soon, so look out for it. And especially right now, a lot of those board certifications are going to be webinars or they're going to be virtual, just with everything going on. So the goal is that, it's easy, that, you have a lot of options to take it. I think, unequivocally, we would recommend the board certification compared to just reading the documents. I think you'll get a lot more out of it as a new board member, but there should be lots of options to sign up for those. And especially this time of year with annual meetings and elections, just start looking out for board certification courses. Almost every expo or trade show that they have will also have those classes. So just a great way to kind of jump into the pool. The next one here. Interested just to get your opinion. This seems more like an opinion question, but the board member writes, are term limits recommended? Again, I think that's more of an opinion. Edwin, what would you say to that? Would you recommend term limits to your community, or just let it fly?
A lot of success that I've seen happens when, again, the board is aligned, they're on the same page, they're a cohesive unit, they're a team. And sometimes you just want them to keep going, right? Go that second year, go that third year, because they're making things happen. And change is good, right? I'm not going to talk down the benefits of change, but sometimes when it ain't broke, that's my philosophy. It's great when I'm partnered with those same board members and we have selfishly, we have multi-year contracts in place with them, but we're teamed up and we're on the same page, and we're going year 2, year 3, year 4 together. And it's like, wow, we're making progress. And the community is speaking back to you. The community will let you know when it's time for you to kind of give up term, right? You'll see it through elections. You'll see it through recalls. You'll see it through more attendance at meetings with more disdain or criticism as to how things are running, right? So that'll be your sign. But for the most part, if the team's doing great, let them keep going. Let them keep running. Crystal, you might have a different opinion. That's just me.
I have a hybrid theory of that. So I like term limits in the respect of them being longer term limits, because you touched on a really good point. There is a period where you transition, where you're finding your footing, where you're getting used to what has been, what's going on, where are we going, and how we're going to get there. So once that really gets going and you're gaining some traction, you don't want to change again. Change over and over isn't healthy for the community. You want to show consistency and stability. So how do we gain that? Is by having a little bit longer time in a position. Every community is individual and is unique, excuse me. So putting a number to that is a little bit out of my circle of suggestion. It's more so, like you said, Edwin, you're gonna get that sign. You're gonna start feeling that adversity, and it's not just on one hot topic. There's going to be more consistency of, I don't know what that person's thinking, or what did they say that for, and it'll be on more and more topics. So you'll get that feeling. I think that term limits can be a good thing, but with the longer timeline.
Longer term limits. Understood, and
Yes.
Great opinions for both. So I'm going to try to knock out 2 with 1 here. We had 2 very similar questions come in. So the first one, I'll read them both. The first one says, what rules govern board members meeting outside of regular meetings? I know we see that all the time with sunshine laws and things like that. And then the second question, very similar, can board of directors meet separately via Zoom meetings in order to prepare and be unified in knowledge and in focus for actual monthly meetings with owners? I'm new on the board and just learning. I think they're both great questions. So 1, can they meet outside of regular board meetings? 2, can they do that maybe if it's on Zoom? Does that make a difference? You guys take it away. How does that work for us?
Ladies first.
So we really have to look toward doing things on the up and up. As frustrating as it can be, it's very important to be above board, so to say, on these things. If you have a quorum, a 5-person board, and we're looking at 3 people, that constitutes a meeting. And we want to make sure and stay transparent. So even if it is to align, even if it is to hash some things out, like I mentioned earlier in a workshop, it's okay to have an informal board meeting. It's much better to have one that is open door and public posted instead of doing things that aren't quite on the up and up. Edwin, can you go ahead and lend to that too?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. So there's only really, under the sunshine laws, there's only 2 ways a board under quorum can meet outside of a board meeting, right? And that's to discuss pending litigation or personnel matters. But they still have to be posted, and your owners are going to be curious what's happening at those meetings, what's going on. And, at some point you're going to have to give them a little information on that. But I definitely, you know, if you're not a quorum, by all means, you know, if you just want to strategize, throw some ideas around, there's no problem with that. Just, you know, be careful, especially now with the age of technology. I'm hearing more and more of associations or board members launching WhatsApp groups, right? And inviting their owners into these WhatsApp sessions, and there's, you know, commentary going back and forth. But you have to understand, even that, or even if it's a text message group, the moment you have a quorum of the board, now you're in violation of those requirements. So just be careful out there. Just remember, if it's majority in any sitting, that's it. You've identified yourselves as having a meeting, and you don't want to, you know, encroach into those waters. So be careful out there.
Well,
Absolutely. And if I can add a tip is, so the follow-up question to that naturally would be, okay, so then how do we get aligned? How do we get on the same page? So look to your president. A lot of times your president is the president of the board is going to be the person that helps you all align, that is the main communicator, the conductor of sometimes what seems like a circus or an orchestra that's going on, many moving parts. That's the person to whom you look for direction. So if you have that person have a conversation, an email conversation, phone call, text, by the poolside, whatever's most convenient and applies to your situation, have conversations, in and out amongst the board members like that. If you have a 9-person board, then go ahead and have 3 people together. And that way there's a witness to that conversation in case something gets lost in translation. By all means, communicate, be open with one another. Just definitely stay away from the quorum if you're wanting to align and work through some things. And you also want to be mindful of not voting or really making motions and big decisions through email. You want to reserve that for the time that you have in a formal business setting in your meetings.
Oh, perfect. And I think that makes total sense. So, well, Edwin and Crystal, we appreciate it. I think we are a little over on our time today. We want to honor everyone's time. We want to thank you guys for joining us. We also want to thank all of our attendees. There were a couple unanswered questions. We're already out of time. Someone will reach out with answers to those questions if you went ahead and put them in the Q&A box. And so we will get in touch with you soon with answers to any remaining. But thank you again for joining us. We hope that the information was valuable. We'll look forward to doing this again soon. Again, there's a board certification course on March 16th, and we will be continuing with our Ask the Experts virtual presentations as well. So keep on the lookout for future presentations. Other than that, hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you again, guys, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thanks all.
Bye.